Okay, we're going to continue our talk about the pathways. If you look in your notes, sorry, you can see I just say pathways and book. So let's go ahead and look at the book. I think this is on page 678. Now I'm going to talk you through this so you might jot down as we go. Okay, so like if I'm testing water in a shower, so to speak, the first thing that's going to happen is I'm going to receive a sensation down a afferent neuron, right? Sensory going in, and what it's going to do is it's going to travel all the way up. This is the green line going all the way up. And remember, it's going to go in the back door, which is a posterior root, through the posterior root ganglion or dorsal ganglion, and go to the dorsal or posterior gray horn. From there, it's going to go to an ascending track if you have to think about it. So it's going to go up the ascending track. And as it goes up the ascending track, it's going to hit the brain. When it does that, it'll be going through the medulla, the pons, the midbrain, through the thalamus, the corpus callosum, and then it's going to go up to that primary somatosensory area, which is the postcentral gyrus. And there, I'm going to think about it. So it's going to go all the way up until it gets there. I'm going to have to think of that in an association area, and then I'm going to send out a response. And when I send out a response, I'm going to go to the central gyrus, which is the primary motor cortex, and I'm going to go downwards, go down a descending track, head this away, again moving through the corpus callosum, the thalamus, the midbrain, the pons, the medulla oblongata, all the way down the descending track till I get to the place where I send out a message from the anterior gray horn through the anterior root, going down the spinal nerve to do the hand that goes, like change the water temperature or don't change the water temperature, whatever my brain has decided that's going to do. So that's the full blown pathway connecting the afferent neuron, as I tell it, and it goes into an interneuron in the spinal cord, many interneurons as it moves up, and then goes back here. And if it goes back here all the way down the efferent neuron, remember coming here, it's switching to an efferent neuron, and it goes all the way down until it hits an effector. And this time the muscles to change the water. Again, that is on page 678. So that's the pathways. I think I can go ahead and include um, the common disorders on this one. So let's talk about spinal cord injuries. Spinal cord injuries can be through trauma. It can be through herniated disc. It might be a tumor or a blood clot that blocks off the supply. And when you have spinal cord injuries, a lot of times you get paralysis. If you have paralysis of a single limb, that's called monoplegia. Think of a single leg. When you think diplegia, it's two limbs, either both upper or both lower. Paraplegia is both lower limbs, like people wheelchair, but they have use of their arms. Hemiplegia is one side, like sometimes you might see in stroke victims where one side has been affected. And I didn't say this, but I want you to understand that the way that the brain is connected are the sensations on the right hand go to the left brain, and the sensations from the right hand, oh no, right, left hand go to the right side of the brain. So if your right side is damaged, then your left body will not be able to move. Okay, quadriplegia is when you have no use of all four limbs. Um, Shingles is caused by the herpes zoster virus. It's chickenpox. What's really weird about shingles is after you have the chickenpox, it goes to the posterior root ganglion and it just sits there until it becomes reactivated. And how it becomes reactivated is a lot of times whenever the immune system has become suppressed for some reason, and it'll just sort of pop out and go back, and it'll go to the where the nerves are going, and it usually affects the trunk. You get pain, discoloration, skin, and blisters. I say it usually affects the trunk, and it can also affect the eyes and things like this. But it's really cool that it sort of is a virus that can go dormant and hide out in the root ganglion for a little while. A cerebral vascular accident, otherwise it's called a brain attack, it's called a stroke. Those are the things that you do. It's caused mainly by blood flow not going to the brain. Remember, we have to have that blood flow to get oxygen. So it can be caused by a hemorrhage in the brain where it's depriving another part of the brain of blood. It can be caused by a blood clot that's blocking the blood flow or some other flow restriction. It can cause paralysis, a loss of sensation, and destruction of the brain tissue itself. Stroke incidents or stroke risk include, and in stroke, I should say, the risk of stroke increases with high blood pressure, high cholesterol, heart disease. TIAs right here is also transient ischemic attacks. They say that there's a correlation between transient ischemic attacks and your increased risk of strokes. Also, diabetes, smoking, obesity, and excessive alcohol intake can affect you in the stroke risk area. The last, oh, sorry, that's not the last. And then you have the transient ischemic attack, which I talked about up here being related to that. Related to strokes. A transient ischemic attack it's temporary. That's why they call it transient. And it has cerebral dysfunction. You might have impaired blood flow for a minute and then pick back up. What people with transient ischemic attacks might have a weakness or dizziness. They might have paralysis or numbness of the face. It might droop down. They might not be able to speak properly for a little while. They might get blurred vision. Generally, they don't last very long at all. It's 5 to 10 minutes, and there's no lasting damage. It's just an indication that, like blood flow may have stopped for a while. It might be totally one episode. If you have recurrent, it can mean that you're at an increased risk of stroke. The next is Parkinson's disease. And that's a progressive degeneration of the basal ganglia. Remember, that's what helps smooth out all of our muscle contractions. And they have decreased levels of dopamine. So they get the tremors, they get the slower voluntary movements and weaknesses, they get uncontrollable movement sometimes of the arms and legs. And then Alzheimer's is next. Everybody's heard of Alzheimer's. It's also called senile dementia, and it's a loss of reasoning. Why we get it, it's unknown. There's very many possible factors going all the way from genes to the environment. One time, I think it's still linked with aluminum deposits, but they don't know why the aluminum deposits occur. So it also has to do with lifestyle choices. But what happens in Alzheimer's is kind of interesting because it's actually we are protecting ourselves from abnormal proteins that are being formed, and we produce plaques to protect ourselves from that, but these plaques affect the brain tissue. So generally it's a slowly progressive disease. At first the person just might be confused. Then the forgetfulness progresses, they get disoriented, they might get lost going to the supermarket, things like that. And eventually the memories will start to disappear. The book itself lasts a lot of pathological changes, and actually Alzheimer's itself cannot be fully diagnosed until a brain biopsy is done, which is after death. But they do it by a list of symptoms, and that's how they actually decide if you have Alzheimer's or not. And that is it for the central nervous system. We are done. Bye, guys.